The edge of silence, the sky above the ruined city was pale and broken like old glass. Clouds hung low like quiet smoke rising from the ashes of forgotten homes. Tall towers leaned at strange angles. Wind moved through hollow windows and empty. Streets, no one lived here anymore. No voices, no machines. No fire. Only silent Celery walked slowly along the narrow path that led to the edge of the highest tower. Her steps made soft sounds against the metal floor. Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon where nothing waited. She looked tired. Her shoulders hung low. Her face showed no fear. She did not shake. She did not cry. She just kept walking. She wore the last uniform of her people. It was torn at the sleeves and faded from sun and rain. A badge still hung near her collar. The symbol was almost gone now. Her people once sang to stars and healed forests and lived without war. But now they were gone. Lost in fire and shadow when two greater forces turned their world into a battlefield Leary had survived by chance. A blast threw her into a tunnel under the earth. When she woke up, the world above was quiet. She found no one. Only buildings half standing, only machines burned black. Only the remains of a city that used to breathe with life. Days passed, then weeks. She waited, she searched, but no one came, not even from the stars. Now she knew they never would. Today she walked with no plan to return. The tower ahead rose like a finger pointing to the sky. It had been part of a communication hub once. The glass bridge at the top still stood, reaching out over the cliffs. Wind blew through its frame. The sound reminded her of voices long gone. She reached the stairs and climbed with slow steps. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not from pain, but from a weight inside her chest. She had no family left, no friends, no orders, no meaning. Only this last place to go. She stepped onto the bridge and looked down. Far below, white clouds rolled like waves. The cliffs dropped into a storm that never ended. She stood still at the edge, her hands rested by her sides. Her eyes stayed open, no fear, no anger, only silence. Then she heard something, a voice, soft, careful, not from her memories, not from her mind. It was real, it was behind her. She turned just a little. A figure stood near. The start of the bridge. A man, human, not armed, not loud. He looked at her but did not step closer. He raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. He said something again. She listened. His words were plain. He said he was part of a repair team sent to check old systems. He said he did not know anyone was here. He said he saw her from his drone feed and came to check. His voice did not rise. He asked no questions. He only stood there and waited. Leary did not answer. She looked away. The wind moved again between them. The man did not leave. He sat down on the floor right there on the bridge. Not close. Not far. Just there. He spoke again. This time not about her. He spoke about himself. He said his name was Mark. He said he once had a brother who stood on a tall building too. Long ago, back on Earth. He said he almost lost him that day, but not because someone jumped. He almost lost him because no one saw him standing there. Mark said he did not want to make that mistake again. Leary turned her head slightly. Her eyes watched him now, not with anger, not with trust, just with quiet. He kept talking. His words were like stones placed gently on the ground, not to trap, not to build walls, just to make a path. He said he did not know her story. He said maybe he never could. But he believed pain did not follow borders or species or stars. He said pain was pain. Leary looked down again. Her fingers curled slightly. Her breath came slower now. Her eyes blinked once. Mark said one more thing. He said maybe it was not the end. Maybe she was just standing at a chapter break. He said even broken stories could turn the page. She did not speak. Not yet. But she stepped back from the edge. Just one step. She sat down on the cold floor, not close to him, but not alone anymore. Sky above them remained cracked and pale. The wind kept moving. The clouds below kept rolling. But now two figures sat on the glass bridge instead of one. Two quiet shapes in the ruins. Leary looked at the horizon again. The silence was still there, but it no longer felt heavy. It just felt like a pause, and sometimes a pause is not the end. It is the space before something begins. The human stranger Leary sat on the cold glass of the bridge with her arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes stared into the endless sky, but her thoughts had shifted. Something had changed. She was not alone anymore. Behind her, the human named Mark remained still. He said nothing for a while. His silence felt patient, not empty. He gave space, but not distance. She felt that the wind moved between them like a quiet river. Leary noticed his boots were worn. His jacket had a small tear near the elbow. He looked tired but not weak. His eyes did not judge. He had no weapon, no device to record her, no loud voice to command. Just a man who had walked into her broken world and sat with her in silence. Finally he spoke again, his voice calm like before. He told her he was sent here to check old relay stations. Most had gone dark after the war. His team stayed on the far side of the cliffs. They worked during daylight and rested near the base station. He had seen movement from one of the towers and came alone to investigate. He had not expected to find someone still. Leary said nothing. Her eyes watched the fog below the bridge. Her heart beat steady now. She was listening. She just did not know what to say yet. Mark looked at the sky as he spoke. He said his home was far away, a place where rain came often and the soil smelled like earth. He missed the trees there. He missed his dog. He missed old songs his mother used to hum when she cleaned the windows on quiet mornings. Leary tilted her head. She did not understand all his words, but she understood his tone. His memories were not spoken to impress her. They were shared like small lights in the dark. He spoke about his brother again. How he had struggled after losing friends in battle. How one evening he stood on a tall building and looked down too long. How no one noticed for hours. Mark was the only one who saw something strange on the security feed. He ran, he climbed the stairs, he shouted his name. He reached him just in time. He told him he still mattered even if it felt like he did not. That day changed both of them. Leary closed her eyes for a moment. Her hands rested on her knees now. The wind touched her face gently. She felt something stir inside her, not sadness, not hope, just something that had not moved in a long time. She finally spoke. Her voice quiet like soft cloth. She said her people did not believe in war. They did not build weapons. They grew food in towers and played music in every street. When the first warning came, they thought it would pass. They did not run. They welcomed the first ships thinking they brought peace. But peace never came. The fire came first. Then the silence. Mark listened. Without a single word, his hand stayed on his lap. His eyes stayed on the clouds ahead. He gave her the same gift she gave him. Space to speak without fear. Leary told him she searched for others after the fall. She sent messages into space. She used old transmitters. She waited for months. No answer, only static. Only the sound of wind through wires. Only the echo of her own voice fading into silence. Mark finally asked her why she came to the bridge. His question was not heavy. It floated like a leaf falling from a tree. She looked at him, not angry, not sad. Just honest. She said she wanted the pain to stop. She said the silence had grown too loud. She said every morning felt like a weight on her back. Every night felt like a wall closing in. She could not find a reason to keep walking. She wanted to rest. She wanted to stop hearing her own thoughts. Mark nodded once. He did not try to correct her. He did not say she was wrong. He just listened. Then he said something simple. He said sometimes the mind plays tricks when the soul is tired. He said even the brightest stars feel lost in thick clouds. But the clouds always move. They never stay forever. Leary looked down again. Her hands opened and closed slowly. She asked him how he knew what to say. He smiled faintly. He said he did not know. He only said what he wished someone had told him when he stood on the edge once too. For the first time, Leary let out a breath that felt real. It left her chest like steam from a quiet pool. She looked at Mark and asked why he stayed. Why he sat there when he could have left. Mark looked at her then. His eyes steady. His voice firm. He said no one deserves to be alone at the end of their story. Not when a new page still waits to be turned. Leary did not answer. But she did not turn away either. The sky above them began to shift. The clouds opened just enough to let soft light fall through. It painted the broken glass in pale gold. Leary reached her hand toward the light. She did not understand why she did it. She just wanted to feel it. Just for a moment. Mark stood slowly. He did not rush her. He offered his hand but did not push. Leary looked at it for a long second. Then she placed her hand in as they walked back across the bridge together. Two shadows against the light, no longer strangers. Not yet friends, but something had begun, something quiet, something real, something that felt like a step forward. Shattered worlds, shared wounds. The air grew warmer as the two figures walked through the remains of the tower. Cracks ran across the walls like old scars. Small pieces of glass crunched under their feet as they moved forward. Mark led the way with slow, careful steps. Leary followed behind, still silent, still watching the world through eyes that had not seen kindness in many long seasons. They reached the lower levels where dust covered every surface like forgotten memories. The path was uneven and filled with signs of a time when life still moved through this place. Broken chairs turned over, data panels frozen in old alerts machines, still waiting for commands that would never come. Leary looked around and remembered how it used to be. She remembered the voices of engineers speaking in soft tones. She remembered the way her mother used to bring food to the workers here. She remembered songs playing on the ceiling speakers, soft melodies that filled the air with calm. Now only the wind remained. Mark noticed the way her eyes lingered on certain places. He did not ask questions. He waited near the exit until she was ready. When she finally stepped forward again, he turned and led her through a narrow tunnel that opened to a small path carved into the cliffside. They walked in silence for a while. Below them, clouds rolled in waves across the open sky. Above them, birds circled without sound. Far ahead, a small structure stood near the edge of a field. Solar panels lined its roof. A tall antenna rose from the back. That was the base where Mark stayed when they arrived. The doors opened with a slow mechanical hiss. Inside the base, everything felt different. Clean lights filled the room. A table stood near the window with tools spread across it. A screen showed maps of the area with blinking signals. A machine in the corner let out a low hum. Leary stepped inside with quiet steps. Her eyes scanned every corner. Mark walked to the side table and poured water into a small cup. He offered it to her with a soft gesture. She took it without a word and drank slowly. The water was warm but fresh. It tasted like safety. Mark moved to the console and typed a few commands. A calm voice spoke from a speaker. It greeted them with a polite message. Leary turned to the sound. She asked if it was a machine. Mark nodded and said it was a helper system called Hera. He said it helped with tasks, repairs, communication, and data storage. The voice of Hera welcomed Leary and asked if she needed medical help. Leary shook her head. Her wounds were not on her body. They were inside her where no scan could see. Mark pulled out a chair and sat. He invited her to sit too. She lowered herself slowly into the seat across from him. They looked at each other for a moment before Leary finally spoke again. She asked him why humans came back to this place after the war. Mark leaned back in his chair. He said some humans felt they had a duty to return and help rebuild what was lost. Others came to collect broken tech or find safe ground for future work. But not all came with greedy hearts. Some like him just wanted to see what could be salvaged. Leary looked at her hands. She said her people never had weapons, because they believed understanding was stronger than power. She said when the war began, they sent messages of peace to both sides. No one answered. She said the last thing her father told her was to survive and remember. Mark listened without speaking. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small square device. He pressed a button and a tiny light shone from it. A hologram rose from the table showing a planet covered in green forests and blue rivers. It was not her planet. It was Earth. He said this was his home once. He said he grew up near a river that glowed in the sun. He said his city was hit during the third wave of attacks. He lost many friends. He said his brother still had nightmares every week. Leary asked him how he kept going. Mark smiled without joy. He said some days he did not know. Some days he only moved forward because he promised someone he would. He said maybe that was enough for now. She nodded slowly. Her eyes did not hold anger anymore, just something softer. Something like understanding. The machine in the corner beeped once. A message came through in a low signal. Mark stood and checked it. He said a storm was moving in from the east and would reach them by night. He invited Leary to stay inside until it passed. She agreed that night. As wind began to rise outside the base, Leary walked through the small halls and touched the walls. She saw old tech and human tools placed with care. She watched as Mark worked on a broken relay chip. She offered to help. Her fingers still remembered how to fix circuit lines from her training days. Together they repaired the chip. No words were needed. Their hands moved in quiet rhythm. When the repair was done, Mark thanked her. His voice held something new. Respect. She felt it, not pity, not duty, but respect. Later she sat by the window and looked at the storm rolling in. Lightning danced across the clouds. The sky roared, but she was not afraid. She felt the weight in her chest shift a little. It did not vanish, but it moved. Mark sat near her holding a warm cup between his palms. He asked if she wanted to tell him more about her people one day. She said yes. Outside, the wind howled across the cliffs inside. A broken soul began to mend. Fully, not quickly, but it had begun. A choice beyond despair. The next morning arrived with a silver light that spread across the sky like soft paint. The storm had passed during the night. The clouds began to drift apart, and the sky above the cliffs opened slowly like a curtain being pulled back. Birds returned to the wind. Quiet sounds of movement filled the air again. Inside the base, Leary stood near the wide window with her arms folded across her chest. Her eyes watched the soft light touch the rocks and towers in the distance. For the first time in many months, she saw color in the world again. The brown of the ground, the soft green of small plants, the faded blue of the far mountains. Mark walked in holding two small cups of warm liquid. He handed one to Leary. She took it with a simple nod. They stood without speaking for a moment. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was calm now. Like a pause between two gentle thoughts, Mark spoke first. He said he needed to check the relay tower on the western ridge. The last storm had damaged the upper panel, and the signal was low. He said he would be gone for most of the day. Then he looked at her and asked if she wanted to come along. Leary looked at him for a few seconds. Then she said yes. They gathered a small pack with tools and parts. Mark handed her a thin scanner and showed her how to check the signal strength. She remembered the process well. Her hands moved with quiet skill. Mark noticed but said nothing. His smile said enough. They walked through the broken paths toward the western ridge. The wind touched their faces. The ground felt firm under their steps. Along the way they passed old machines covered in dust and vines. Metal once strong now rested like bones on the side of the road. Leary paused near one and ran her fingers across the symbol of her people. Faded but still, their mark stopped too. He waited while she stood in silence. She did not cry. She did not speak. She just breathed. Then she turned and kept walking. They reached the relay tower. They found the upper panel had been cracked by falling debris. The signal dish had shifted. Wires hung loose near the side. Mark climbed halfway up the frame and secured the top cable. He called down to Leary, asking her to check the reading. She scanned the console and called back the numbers. They were not perfect, but better. They would need to fix the internal circuit next. Leary opened the panel and looked inside. The design was similar to the older model she had trained on. She asked Mark for a tool by name. He handed it to her without question. Together they worked in rhythm, his hands steady and strong. Her hands light and quick. The wind moved around them as they worked. Leary felt something strange. Not fear, not sadness. Just a strange warmth deep in her chest. A sense of doing something that mattered. A feeling that her actions had purpose again. After 2 hours the tower was working. The signal light turned green. The system gave a soft beep. Mark laughed with relief. He raised his hand toward her. She looked at it for a moment, then lifted her own. Their hands met in a quick, quiet gesture. On the way back they walked slower. The sun, now higher above the cliffs, warmed the path beneath their feet. They stopped near an old well where water still moved under the ground. Mark knelt and filled a small container. He handed it to Leary. She drank. The water tasted clean and cool. It felt like something sacred. Leary sat down on a flat stone near the edge of the path. Mark joined her. She asked him if he ever felt tired of carrying pain. He said yes, every day. But he also said the pain did not win unless you stopped walking. He said the smallest step forward could still be a victory. She looked down at her hands again. Then she told him something she had not said before. She said she once led a small team of engineers. They built towers like this. They used to laugh during breaks and share music from every region of their planet. She said she missed that sound the most. Mark asked her what the music sounded like. Leary hummed a simple tune. It rose into the air like a small breeze. The sound moved between them like a thread from her world to his. Mark closed his eyes for a moment and listened. They sat for a while in that place between sky and earth. Then Leary stood. She said they should return. Mark nodded. They walked back through the ruins together. The world around them still broken, but not without beauty. Back at the base, Mark placed the fixed circuit board on the shelf. Leary sat near the screen and looked at the blinking dots. Signals from nearby towers, now steady. She asked if there were any old files left in the system from before the war. Mark said maybe. He opened a hidden folder and found a group of unread messages. They opened the first one together. It was from a technician who had stayed behind during the early days of the invasion. The message spoke of hope, of waiting for help, of refusing to believe that all was lost. Leary read the words aloud, her voice strong but soft, as if the message had been written for her, as if it had waited all this time to be heard. Mark watched her and said he believed her people left something behind that mattered, not just structures and signals, but spirit. Something still alive in her voice, in her hands, in her choice to keep living. She looked at him with eyes that no longer held only grief. They held something brighter now, not joy, not peace, but direction. She asked him if he thought she could help rebuild more. He said yes. Without doubt. That night she stood outside the base again. The stars above were clear, the sky wide and open. She raised her head and whispered a word in her language. A word that meant remember. A word that meant continue. The wind answered her, not with sound, but with feeling, and that was enough. The sky is still wide. Morning arrived without warning. Light slipped into the base like a visitor with no sound. It touched the walls. It touched the floor. It touched the face of Leary as she sat near the console reading through old records. Her eyes moved from line to line. Her fingers tapped slowly as if searching for something hidden in the past. Mark walked in with a datapad in his hand. He asked her if she had slept. Leary looked up and gave a quiet answer. Only for a short while. She had been thinking, reading, remembering. The past no longer chased her. Now she was walking toward it without fear. Mark placed the datapad on the table. It showed a new signal from a nearby valley. A tower had gone dark again. He suggested they could go together and fix it. Leary nodded without pause. This time it was her who prepared the tools. Her hands moved with purpose. Her steps were steady before. They left. Leary looked at the small mirror near the door. She saw her face. It looked tired but stronger. Not the same face that had once stared down into the clouds from the edge of a broken bridge. This face had lived through silence and chose to rise again. The path to the valley was long. Trees with thin arms reached out toward the sky. Grass moved under their feet like waves. They walked side by side with words passing between them like smooth stones thrown into still water. Mark told her about a plan to reopen the old research station near the mountains. He said they needed someone with knowledge of alien tech. He said her name came to mind. First Leary asked him why he trusted her so quickly. He said it was not quickie. Said trust was something that grew slowly like roots. Under stone, and hers had already reached far. When they reached the broken tower, they saw it had been damaged by shifting ground. Parts had fallen. Panels were loose. The wind had carried sand into the main controls. It would take time to fix. They set to work without delay. Leary opened the lower chamber while Mark climbed to inspect the dish. Their voices rose and fell across the distance, each word clear. Each instruction followed without question. The sun climbed higher, and the wind carried the sounds of work into the sky. After many hours, the signal light returned. A soft glow, a clear message. The tower was awake again. Leary smiled for the first time in days. A real smile. Not a small one. Not a quiet one. A smile that touched her eyes. Mark climbed down and saw her face. He smiled too. On their way back, they stopped near a field where flowers had begun to bloom. Small petals opened toward the sky. Leary knelt and touched one with the back of her hand. She asked how they had grown here in such soil. Mark said life finds a way when no one expects. I said the same about people back at the base. Leary opened a new file on the console. She began recording her memories. Not just names and dates, but feelings and stories. She wanted to preserve the songs of her people, their colors, their beliefs, not as a list, as a voice. Her voice. Mark helped her organize the data. He showed her how to send it through the relay towers to reach other bases. Together, they worked late into the night. The base filled with soft lights and soft sounds. A space once filled with cold silence, now full of purpose. Weeks past the valley began to change. More towers were fixed, more messages were sent, more systems came online. One day, a new voice came through the console. A message from a human team in orbit. They had received Leary's records. They had listened. They wanted to include her work in the shared knowledge project. A voice once lost, now chosen to be part of a new library across the stars. Leary stood near the edge of the base that evening. She looked at the sky with calm eyes. She no longer searched for signs of rescue. She no longer waited for a message that would never come. She had become the message now. Mark stood beside her. He asked her what she would do next. She said she would stay. She said she would help others who had lost their path. She said no one should stand at the edge alone. He nodded once. He said he was glad she chose to live. She looked at him and said his words gave her that choice. The wind moved around them, not cold, not harsh, just full of breath, full of promise. Later that night, Leary sat at the table and played a recording. It was a song. A soft tune made from pieces of old memory. She played it through the tower speaker. It echoed across the cliffs and fields. It reached places where only silence had lived before. The stars above listened. The earth below remained quiet, but something had changed. Leary walked outside and stood at the same place where she once stood, ready to fall. She looked down at the clouds. Again, but this time she looked not for escape. She looked for depth, for distance, for the wide world still waiting. She did not belong to the past anymore. She did not carry only sorrow now, she carried voice, she carried purpose, she carried life. She stepped back from the edge. She turned toward the path. She walked forward. The sky above her was still wide, still high, still full of unknown places, but she was not afraid of the unknown now. She was ready not to end, but to begin the end.